When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Hello, everybody. It's Scott Mason, revving up for another journey down the Purpose Highway. This is part 2 of our first season's finale, and special guest Cole Pasley returns to finish telling us his remarkable story. Last time, Cole talked about how he ended up in the military, training to decommission roadside bombs in the Middle East. He shared with us what his training taught us about leadership, what the connection that he built with his fellow servicemen teaches us all about vulnerability and bonding. He also shared what it was like when his first mission was a success and what happened when things changed. We pick it up from there.
Every single month for 10 months, I lost a friend or an acquaintance. And during that period, some of these were due to combat, some of them were due to accidents, others were due to suicide. Then the following year, so 2010, trying to get my dates right. So a few months after my 2009 incident that I'm talking about with my friend is when my first boss that I had, him and the gentleman who was and still is my best friend, I mentioned my kids are willed
Yes.
to him. It's that guy. So my first boss and my friend are in Afghanistan. We get a message saying, hey, Adam's been killed, Josh is hurt. And then, hurt in EUD could be a concussion, or it could be you lost both arms, both legs. You have no idea. So walking through that, and then to later on in 2010, losing another close friend. So during that period, I lost 3 close friends, and then numerous other acquaintances. So that period for me was kind of this just introduction to death, where I'd never experienced anything like that on the outside.
Most people listening to this or watching this will never experience anything like that. That's
Sure.
incomprehensible. Even on 9/11.
Sure.
And I think that there is an exception in that situation or in other mass death situations like mass shootings or something where occasionally people experience these sudden deaths of a bunch of people that they may or may not know. But what you're talking about is a sustained period where, for all intents and purposes, as I'm hearing this, every time you turn around, either a close acquaintance of yours, someone very important to you, or maybe someone who wasn't in your immediately closest circle, but still in your circle, is gone.
Right.
That's incomprehensible to most people. You say that changed your relationship with death. You say that introduced you to death in a different way. I have to ask, honestly, is that a little bit of an understatement? How do you even begin to process this, or were you able to process it without decompression time? I guess I just talk to us a little bit more about
Sure.
what this was like for you psychologically.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different angles there, Scott. Like it, and this, right, this is, transparent, like kind of opening myself up to other people, and hopefully these experiences help in some way. But this is kind of that 2010. So going through that was very, very, very developmental for me, as a person, for the emotional resiliency
Yes.
piece. And let me be clear, I did not have emotional resiliency during that time. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. Like, man, I really learned how to be resilient during that time. That's not what happened at all. And then, another shout out to my wife in this situation for sticking around while I walked through that, because it wasn't always pretty, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, that 2010 time frame was just it was mentally a pretty dark place for me. I didn't really know what to do with it. I went to mental health professionals during that time, and not as a, hey, I think I'm going crazy, or hey, any of this. It's just, and looking back, and what I kind of tell people now is to go through stuff like that and to not be affected probably means you're a psychopath and you need some help.
Yeah.
If you are a normal human being, to go through that stuff, to be completely wrecked means that you're a normal person, right? You have to get impacted. And looking back, that's kind of what I started to realize, that developmental journey for me, right? I went to the mental health professionals and found that I wasn't really able to connect with them. The good news is, if you can call it good news, is that I wasn't alone in my struggle. The entire EUD career field had similar experiences, and honestly, Scott, much worse experiences in some, if not many, cases. So what really ended up helping was to talk through it, and to sit there and kind of share experiences, to decompress, to cry, to yell, to do all of these things, right? When the light switch really began to kind of flip for me, and we can talk later. So during this same period is when I was really going through my spiritual Christianity journey as well, and it was honestly separate from this. Like I wasn't exploring religion as a coping mechanism, and I'd actually kind of started that journey before this deployment. And so it was kind of separate, but I was developing my spirituality at the same time, and also kind of my emotional persona, I guess, at the same time, my posture. And when the switch really flipped, I was at my dad's house. I was on leave. I was at his house, just on vacation. And Scott, I honestly couldn't tell you why I was doing it, but I think I went to YouTube and I Googled my friend's name, or YouTubed, my friend's name, the one that I had to clean up there, and I found his, we call it a ramp ceremony, right? So it's when the plane carrying his remains lands back in the States, and you've got the flag draped coffin at this time. It comes off. There's his EUD unit, another EUD unit that was nearby that actually had some friends of mine in it, his family. So, the military people are out there saluting, the casket's being brought off. And then that they actually put together a kind of a video of his funeral. And I watched this video and I broke, Scott. Like I was in my dad's house, and my dad wasn't in the military. This is kind of a foreign world to him as well, and I shut the door, I locked it, and I think I probably watched the video maybe 10 times, and I just sit in that office and cried. And from that moment on, it was like I felt lighter. And what I started to realize is a big component of it is I had never gotten closure, because we went and we did the operation. When something like that happens, there's, an investigation starts immediately. So you're, 2 or 3 days, you're getting questioned by every level of command. What happened? What did you see? What happened here? And so the event happened. We went and did our job. We rehashed it for 2 or 3 days. And then we started our process to get out of there and go home, and it just kind of ended, right? So I never got that closure. And once I found that video and I started to get closure is when things really started kind of coming together for me a little bit.
I want to step back a little bit. You went and you saw some mental health professionals about some of the issues that you were facing. One of the things that is interesting about that is in the civilian world, there is a common challenge that men in particular face around seeing therapists or counselors around mental health issues that they might be facing. I've had some guests on this show, for instance, that are suicide awareness activists. And one of the challenges that can happen to those who might be suffering from suicidal ideation is that they feel it somehow weakens them as a man to be able to talk about those issues. One of the things that I am curious about is whether in a military setting you felt any of that. And I think the reason for that, again, is because no one doubts the male creds of someone who's spending his days dissembling IEDs. Yet you found it in your heart to go see someone like that. And you said, by the way, that suicidal ideation that actually apparently came to pass was some of the reasons why people were seeing some of these counselors. What would you say to someone who is watching this or listening to it about any reservations they might have around seeing mental health professionals when they're facing challenges that are, in their own eyes, overwhelming?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, quite simply, I would say just do it. Go see them. All right. So, and I'll walk through that story a little bit. When I went to mental health, I'll step back actually one more time. The mental health community in the military has immensely done amazing things over the past 10, 15 years. It's gotten very, very advanced. When I went to mental health, we were kind of right in the beginning stages for the Air Force EOD program of experiencing these combat things. Now, the thing about the Air Force, right, is we are by and large not a direct combat branch of the military unless you're in a select few career fields or fighter pilots or things like that. So it's unlike the Army where you have just thousands of infantry people and it's a common thing. So it's not that the mental health community there was not helpful. It's just that there wasn't that common connection and that common understanding. And to reiterate it, we've come a long way. But what I did is once I found out, like, man, this isn't working for me, I went to a chaplain and I talked to the chaplain. When I left the chaplain, I went to a friend who does counseling down in Florida, and I called that person. Then I went to some other EOD guys, and we talked to each other there. And I eventually down the road ended up going back to other mental health professionals and talking to them. So, and it's always kind of, if I'm having, particularly like a religious conversation with someone, people look at me funny when I say this as a Christian, but I'm like, hey man, like the simple fact of life is you're just not going to like some people, like there's just people out there that I don't like and I don't want to be around them. Like that's just the fact. And I am certain that there's just as many people, if not more, that feel the same way about me, and that is completely fine,
absolutely.
right? So this mental health person you go to, if you don't like them, that's fine. Get another one, right? There's tons of more options and tons of more avenues, but it's important that you don't go to one or to two and say, well, that didn't work, and then give up, because humans, quite simply, are just not designed to do this crap alone, right? We are built for connection, and we are built for community, and especially when you're facing challenges and suicidal ideations, especially, it is crucial to find somebody to walk through that with you, and it's you can't go to the first person and be like, man, I don't like them, so this isn't going to work, and then just give up, right? Go find. There's somebody out there that's going to be able to help and speak into that.
So you watched that YouTube video. You had a moment. Yeah. What happened next?
So what happened next is I kind of just started to piece everything together. So this was, and I'm trying to remember the exact date. So I got orders to go overseas. So this time to be stationed overseas. I was stationed in Turkey, and I got another deployment from there. But during this time frame, so kind of what had happened with me through this journey is, so I was raised in church as a kid. My parents, before they were divorced, went to church. After they were divorced, they both went to church, separate churches, obviously, but regardless of where I was, staying with my mom or my dad, I was in church. When I joined the military, it's not that I stopped believing, but some of the, trying to figure out how to use my words in a way that's going to communicate what's in my head here. Especially in the Deep South where I grew up, a lot of the culture, people raise you to go to church. They don't necessarily prepare you to be a Christian a lot of times. And that's I don't know, like I knew, right? I'd read the Bible. I had gone to church. I knew the do's and the don'ts. But once I joined the military, Scott, I was out on my own. I was 18. I was 19. If I had the choice of waking up early and going to church or sleeping in, sleeping in won out most of the time. I would nominally go. I'd go on the holidays. If I was home on leave, I would go. I'd go about once a month. So it didn't really I didn't walk away from faith, but it definitely stopped being important to me. So prior to that 2009 deployment, my mom had actually purchased a book for me written by a guy named Lee Strobel. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but he was a paralegal. I think he was a legal editor for the Chicago Tribune. If memory serves me right, he was educated at Yale, and his wife became a Christian, and it really pissed him off. So he set out to, I'm going to prove my wife wrong. I'm going to use the same tactics that we use on the legal side. I'm going to speak to subject matter experts. I'm going to build the evidence. I'm going to lay out this case in front of my wife and say, look, the stuff you're believing in is BS. You need to walk away from it. So he went and I think he interviewed something like a dozen experts with, doctoral degrees in their fields. He went around. The exact details are fuzzy for me now, but archaeologists, historians, literature experts, things like that. So what he did during this process is he actually convinced himself of the validity of Christianity and converted himself, trying to prove his wife wrong. So I read that book. And what that one book did for me was it opened my eyes to, okay, maybe there's something more to faith, to spirituality, than having to suspend your intellect in order to have faith. And I started researching. So I started reading a lot of other books. Frank Turek Norman Geisler, William Lane Craig. So I started going through this, spiritual journey. John Lennox, Michael Behe, all these experts who have doctoral degrees. That was kind of my thing. Is I was kind of tired of being preached at for a while. I wanted to go, if I'm going to believe this or if I'm going to reject it, it's going to be because I did my own research and I made a decision based off of what I've read and what I've found. So I started this study, and what I quickly learned is that there's a lot of evidence, a lot of history, a lot of archaeology, a lot of literature experts out there, and you can build your case to Christianity differently than kind of how I had seen it done in the past. So I went through that, and then I started to say, okay, well, let me look at the other side, right? So I started reading, we'll call it, some atheists, some people who are less than favorable to evangelical Christianity, particularly. So started reading Chris Hitchens, who, by the way, is my favorite atheist. I read Chris Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, the Daniel Dennett, Diana Bass. There's Bart Ehrman, right? I started reading through all of these people, and I found that I found those arguments to be less than satisfying. So what I did is I went through this process, and I said the arguments in favor of Christianity for me are more convincing, more satisfying, more sense-making than those against it. So, and I say this because it happened in parallel with this death journey that I went on, and it you can't really have one without the other going through this process. So when I did this closure thing, right, that kind of flipped the light switch for me and said, man, let me start trying to figure out what this worldview means. And I started developing for myself a worldview where it feels unsatisfying to say this, but it's the only way I can think of to put it right now, but where death just kind of makes sense, if that adds up. You know what I'm saying?
I want to hold on to that, actually, because there's so much in what you said a few minutes ago that's worth exploring.
Okay.
I'm not going to let it go.
Okay, all right,
when you say that the Christian-based reading that you undertook was more satisfying than the atheistic reading or more secular reading that you were doing, what do you mean by satisfying, and why was one more satisfying than the other?
Yeah, so what I mean by satisfying is intellectually satisfying. And this is right. I get this is a very contentious topic for a lot of people, but as we spoke yesterday in the pre-brief, I'm kind of in that weird gap where I'm a leadership practitioner, right? But I'm trying to also dive deep into the academic side, and I eventually so through this reading, I eventually said, man, if I'm going to do this, like, let me just dive in. It's something I enjoy studying. Great thing about the military is they'll pay for your education, right? So I did my bachelor's in religion, and I was like, man, that was fun. I really enjoy the historical side of that. Let me do my master's of religion and church history and things of that nature. So, and then now with the PhD studies, like I've tried to become an objective thinker. Now, the argument can be made that nobody can ever be truly objective, right? You always have some level of bias there. But looking back, I try to say, like, I can look back for my own self and say I don't think I carried a whole lot of bias, and I was just as ready to walk away from Christianity as I was to embrace it. So I looked at these things like there are problems, there are questions in the world, right? Why is there? The famous way that it's phrased is, why is there something rather than nothing, right? Why, like, how did all of this come to be? Was there a start to the universe, or has it just been eternally existent? Why do I think that, murdering an 8-year-old girl is worse than stealing $100 bill off of someone's desk? These why things, and really what it comes down to, and of course we could, probably do a whole another podcast just on this, and there's, far better experts out there on it than me, of course, but what it really came down to is that, if naturalism is true, right? If the only thing out there is nature, that stuff just didn't add up for me. It didn't make sense to me. Why do I feel the way that I do about my spouse, my daughter, my son? Why am I, we got being stationed in Germany, we got the opportunity to go visit Auschwitz, right? And I read a lot of the Auschwitz material. Why are we so offended by something like that? Why is that not just, animals doing what animals do? You look at the moral argument, you look at the start to the universe, you look at natural laws, you look at the complexity of things around us. And these, in my mind, these are problems. They're intellectual problems that in my life and in my spiritual journey, they demanded an answer, right? I wanted an answer to these. So I started reading through it's called Christian apologetics material, right? These experts in Christian apologetics. And then I read through the atheistic material and the more secular stuff. And I love having those conversations still, on both sides. I think there's very good, ideas and conversations to be had on both sides. But the answers that were provided on the Christian side were more intellectually satisfying to me. And the buzz phrase, I think, is they carried what has more explanatory power. And that's, for me, spiritually, that's what I found in that material.
It's interesting because the stereotype, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, the stereotype of the person who might examine the evidence or might examine the thinking behind both types of philosophical systems, for lack of a better word, if they ultimately choose a faith-based approach as a more convincing, people often say, well, that's just because an emotional need is being fulfilled. They're throwing away their intellect. At the same time, you're saying that your whole pull away from the church that you grew up in was, if I'm understanding you correctly, at least partially driven by the fact that you could not tolerate a system in which your intellect couldn't be fully exercised and in which that system could not withstand that analysis.
That's partially true, Scott. I would, at risk of sounding like I'm bashing my childhood tradition, right? What I don't want to do is do that. There are some great, phenomenal people in my childhood tradition, and some very smart, well-educated people there. So I should step back for a minute and say that I think that the preparation to send me on the journey that I went on myself doesn't happen enough in my childhood tradition. And there's various reasons for that. What I discovered is that there's idiots everywhere. is basically what I discovered, and there are people on both sides of this issue. Again, probably a very controversial statement I'm about to make, but there are people on both sides of this issue that suspend their intellect to make a faith call. And there are angry Christians on sidewalks in churches, on YouTube, who spew ignorant and hateful things. I'll admit that. But there are also atheists, albeit fewer in churches and on sidewalks, but there are also people from that side, right, who get on YouTube and they spew ignorant and hateful things. And I'm not interested in these people. When I go through my walk, right, if I'm trying to have deep exploratory conversations, I generally don't turn to the YouTube, like from his basement preacher or atheist. I want to go to the experts who have dedicated their life to earning terminal degrees and studying this and find out what they say. Because, it's, one of the things that I get, talking about church is people are like, well, Christians are hypocrites, and I think it was, Frank Turek had the joke like, well, we've got room for one more, come on down, and it's, if people get it wrong, that doesn't really, to me, say much about the actual belief system itself. That's why I try to tune out that noise. And really what I found, Scott, is that the people that make these, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, the ones that we're talking about, the ones that kind of spew ignorance and hate on both sides, if you dig in, they're really just hurt. like a lot of them have been hurt at some point in their life, and they're trying to just, pass that on to other people. And it's just static in the background to the actual debate. But yeah, there's definitely that stigma out there of the ones who choose faith after going through this have suspended intellect. I think there's a list of 6 or 7 people that I read off, and there's like 10 doctorate degrees between them all. So it's hard to believe that people like that are dumb. And what I found out is that I think there's really a renaissance of Christian apologetics where there's people kind of starting to get involved in that intellectual side of it.
You said that you were raised in the church, but
right.
You seemed to distinguish between that and your spirituality. Or am I imposing a distinction that you never really made?
That's let's see. Yeah, that's there's a difference there. I don't, so the church that I was raised in, right, I go back to it, I visit it. There's no I'm not trying to communicate that I've moved beyond that, right? I think the Western church they haven't been as invested, at least in my tradition, they hadn't been as invested in preparing children for this journey of how to think. Because there's a difference between what to think and how to think. So I guess that would be the distinguishment is growing up in this environment, I was kind of taught what to think. There wasn't so much as what to think through apologetics. And then I later picked up how to think through things so that I could kind of go back and retroactively say, all right, so what do I think in light of how to think? And some of these things, there's the Bible, and then there's tradition, and then there's certain unique specific church traditions and doctrines and things like that. So there's now, looking back, I feel like I'm more mature in my thinking and mature in my faith, where I can go back to my people that are in that faith tradition, and we can have substantive conversations. And there's some things, right there. So there's the core doctrines of Christianity, right, that people, some people are familiar with. But there's the kind of the fringe things that, and I don't necessarily agree with some of the people that I was raised around. And then there's a lot of places where we find agreement, and that's all good. It's part of that learning how to think about things.
Well, on the topic of what to think. Going forward in the conversation a little bit, since we stepped back a few minutes ago, you said that death kind of began to make sense. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So there's kind of two sides to my faith and my journey when it comes to that, right? So one side is logical, and that's kind of what I just explained, right? I went through all of these just logical, like, here's these questions, here's this problem, here's these answers, evaluate it, weigh the evidence. That's the logical side. The next side for me is experiential. And that's even in the Bible, right? Some of the come and see for yourself type side of Christianity. So there's the experiential side of Christianity for me. And what I didn't do with my Christianity is I didn't use it as a coping mechanism, in which I think a lot of people do this with numerous faith traditions is, I have this problem, I have this traumatic experience, I have this identity crisis. Let me pull this religion off the shelf and use that as a coping mechanism to get me through that. And I'm probably guilty of doing that, but I try not to. What Christianity is to me is it comes down to it's either true or it's not true, right? And that's a statement that probably most people I hope could agree on. It's either true or it's not. So if it is true, then things that happen can be viewed through that light. And one of the things that happens in light of Christianity is humans are not made to stay on this earth, right? The earth is a temporary dwelling, so to speak. The other thing is one of the tenets of Christianity is fallen, right? The earth, the universe, and mankind is fallen. We're selfish people. The earth is full of sickness and death, and things just don't always go the way that we think they should go. And the other thing is a lot of religions put the work on the person. And that's another kind of thing that I experienced in some church traditions too. And, hey, you need to get your life right, then you could come be a part of this religion. And I hear it all the time, Scott, with people like, well, I got to get my life right, and then I can come back to church. And that's kind of, it's not really biblical, right? In the Bible, there was always grace first, then the life change. So I kind of started tying all of that in with death. Is like, man, these experiences have been really, really, really bad. And you start to focus on the bad. But I love the way C.S. Lewis put it. He said, in order for me to know that a line is crooked, I have to know what a straight line looks like. So I started asking myself, like, why are these bad? Why is it tragic that this happened? Why am I sad? And the reason is that evil and bad things are really proof that good exists. Because if good didn't exist, we would have no idea how to even measure these bad things. So I started kind of to piece these things together and develop this worldview where this kind of spirituality came to be my identity and kind of the core of who I was, because that was another piece that I had to kind of sort myself through as well as my identity, because we had, going back to my training, day one at EUD school, you're taught, hey, this is the best career field since sliced bread. Not a lot of people make it through. It's hard. You get this EOD badge that you can wear, and it's an amazing thing. And we take that on as an identity. I joked with you yesterday. I have multiple EUD tattoos. I got an EUD tattoo on my back. I got EUD tattoos on both of my arms. I got an EUD tattoo for an EUD guy on my leg. My wife has an EUD tattoo. My kids wear EUD shirts. My dog has EUD collars. There's EUD stickers on my car, right? So like EOD is who I was. If people would say, what do you do? It's I'm EOD. It's not I'm a husband. It's not I'm a Christian. It's not I'm a Harley enthusiast or whatever. I'm EOD. So what happened when EOD put me into bad situations, and then I started to lose people to whom I had tied my identity, I didn't really, it was almost like losing a part of myself being lost. I had tied my identity up into my profession. My profession put me into some bad spots, and I didn't really know how to deal with that. As I was piecing myself through the spiritual journey, your identity shifts. And I'd never really been able to think past EOD. So when I began to shift my identity back to, all right, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. And I'll stop here to say I'm not trying to act perfect, right? I screw this up every single day, multiple times a day. But I try to live as though first I'm a Christian. That is where my identity is. And as a Christian, I experience these other things. And right, the world's fallen. Death is going to happen. The only logical conclusion to life is death, right? Bad things are going to happen. There is evil in the world. There are people out there who want me dead just because of who I am. That's a reality of the world, and this is kind of how this fallen nature works. So, and honestly, you know, I'm kind of rambling on. There's not like an end point to this journey, because Scott, I'm really still on it, right? Even just recently, lost a really close friend of mine last year, who when I was stationed in Turkey, his dad was my boss. He was in college. He would come visit from time to time. Well, series of events, I stayed very close friends with the family, kept up with him. He came into EOD while I was an instructor, so I kind of led him through the school a little bit. And then he went to Germany, and I was his shop leader over in Germany. Well, he developed cancer and battled that for, you know, a year and a half, and then eventually passed away. And you know, it freshens it all up, right? Because that was a whole new struggle for me, because now I'm used to losing friends, but I'm used to it being unexpected. Now here's a whole new thing of, I'm not used to watching this happen from a year away, right? And these struggles. So there was another journey to go through of like, man, like, God, why cancer? Yeah. You know, like why does this happen? And when you start to view like the world is a fallen place, and that's kind of the whole motif of Scripture, right? Is we are in need of that Savior, and the spiritual journey with the emotional resiliency journey just kind of intermingled together for me to say, like, you know what, the world's not going to be perfect. Like, the only thing that we've really been promised in this world is struggle and pain and death and sickness. But when viewed through that spiritual lens, it makes sense, because there's the other side of it, right? How do we know this is bad if we don't have that other side?
How did that play out day to day?
Well, going back, you know, to you know, I always, when somebody asks who I am now, I try to say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm an EOD guy, in that order. But like I said, I screw it up every day, you know, and that's one of my favorite verses in the Bible is it's from Paul, and you know, Paul was, you know, arguably one of the best Christian ministers in history. Wrote most of the New Testament. But I mean, he's out there, you know, you would think the guy that wrote most of the New Testament's got it together. And he wrote in one of his letters, he's like, I don't know who I am. He's like, the things that I want to do, I don't. And the things that I hate, I still do it. He's like, and I don't understand. So I find comfort in that, because it's like, man, if the greatest Christian, you know, aside from Christ that ever lived, still struggled and got it wrong and did things that he knew he wasn't supposed to do, then, you know, how am I going to sit here and beat myself up over messing it up? So that day-to-day journey, Scott, you know, it's just that, it's a journey. It's you know, some days I some days it works, some, I do well. There was, I think it was back in, I can't remember, a few years ago, but I found the documentary Restrepo, and for people who aren't familiar with it, it was about an outpost in Afghanistan, named after a kid named Restrepo, and kind of their experience. And it took me probably 6 times to get through watching that movie, because it just took me back to the anguish. Mm-hmm. And it's a back and forth. So the day to day is I'd be lying if I said, it's smooth sailing.
Yesterday, when we were prepping for this interview, we talked about some of the social changes that are occurring in our society around mm-hmm. faith traditions. And in a way, you might have experienced them before a lot of other people have, because the military is known for being perhaps one of the most, from a faith perspective, integrated institutions that there is. There's literally mm-hmm. every faith under the sun there. Mm-hmm. How do you reconcile and live with the faith tradition that has enabled you to develop the resilience and the ability to accept death and things that you're seeing all the time, with the pervasiveness of other traditions?
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that I try to, and I can only speak from my experience, right? So some of the churches that I've seen, let me put it like this. My goal is not to make non-Christians act like Christians, right? I think some of the churches that I've seen have kind of, and that's where we get that, I got to get my act together, then I can go back to church. There's that stigma out there of like, hey, the church expects you to act a certain way, and then you can go there. And that's, to me, and as I stated earlier, I think that's backwards. And my goal as a Christian is not to go around and make people that aren't Christians act like Christians. Like, that just doesn't logically make sense. I've been, and especially as a leader in my organization, right? My heart's desire is that I'm a leader for all people, not just those who agree with me. And that's not only, just religion, that's everything, mm-hmm. Scott. Like one of the most hazardous things as an EOD guy is if I think I've got it all figured out and I won't listen to the advice of my team member who's telling me like, hey, you're about to do something wrong, right? So my goal is not to just make people agree with me. But I thoroughly enjoy like these types of conversations, right? I love the interaction, and there's all when it comes to spirituality, there's all types of people out there, and there's people that don't want to talk about it at all. They don't care about it. And, I don't like, what's the fun in forcing somebody to talk about something they don't want to talk about, right? I said I liked intellectual debate and discussion. I don't like being a street preacher, mm-hmm. in my organization. There's some people that have very different views, and we've talked about that. One of my closest friends in EOD is not the gentleman that I mentioned earlier that's the godfather of my kid, but another friend of mine. He's has different faith views than me, and we have amazing friendly discussion all the time. It's enjoyable. And then there's people out there, of course, that are just combative about it, and it's it's not those. If it's not going to bear fruit, if it's not going to be, intellectual, it's not worth it. So it's one of those things where, I enjoy talking about it. I understand that not everybody does. It's not something that I go around and beat people over the head with, but I'm a very transparent person. I love talking about it. But at the end of the day, if you're working in my organization, or if I'm surrounded by you or friends with you, my goal is not to make you act like me like that. And I've never understood people who take that approach, right?
What is the relationship then between that attitude and leadership? And is there anything outside of that, if you agree that there's a relationship at all, that EOD has uniquely taught you about leadership that you might want to share with other leaders?
Yeah, it's so there was I'm trying to remember the time frame. I think it was back in the 16th century is when Blaise Pascal said that there's a God-shaped hole in everybody's heart, right? And so I look at people, and not just people in my organization. I look at people around the world, and people are searching for something, right? And I think that's really the whole premise of your podcast, yes. Right? Is people finding their purpose, finding that, and I think on that we can agree that people out there are searching for something, and that the idea of that God-shaped hole in people's heart is moving for me, and it helps me view my my troops as humans, as people. There's people with hurts, there's people with victories, there's people with awesome things going on in their life, there's people with terrible things going on in their lives. And then wrapped in all of this, people are searching for an identity, they're searching for purpose, and they're trying to fill this hole in their heart. And some people do it with toxic behavior, and others are genuinely looking for the answer, right? And so I think the journey that I went through in EOD, it taught me, like, as I mentioned earlier, there's just, like, not to take myself so dang seriously. Like there's just not that much in life to get really upset about. Even when things go really, really, really unbelievably wrong, it's still not all that bad, right? So that part taught me patience with people. The spiritual journey and the search for meaning and things like that, it's taught me, and it's still teaching me to be sensitive to other people's journeys and their problems and their positions in life. And again, Scott, I'd be remiss to say that if I didn't say that, I don't screw that up, because I do. Right, I'm like any other person. I get task-based. I get 100 emails in. I get a task I got to do, and then my people suddenly become tools to get the mission done. And I have to rewind myself back and be like, man, he's got something going on at home. His parents sick. Her dog died. Whatever's going on in that situation. So, the spiritual side really has helped me be sensitive to people are hurting, people are searching. The EOD side has taught me to just not take life so serious. There's just not that much worth spiking your blood pressure over. Yeah.
And hearing it from you would be hard for a lot of people to argue with that. Cole, you said very early in the interview or in the discussion that you believed that joining EOD ultimately was related to your purpose. Talk to me a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, that's another journey I'm still on. But it's amazing how hindsight, nothing shows you your path clearer than hindsight, right? And it's I'm one of those guys where I get an idea in my head and I just commit to it 100%. I go for it, and then suddenly when I get a new idea in my head, I either finish that and move to the next one, or I just give up on that one and go somewhere else. And I've seen, right, so my worldview starts with the truth of Christianity, and I've seen through that the uniqueness of how I think that God has just ordered my life in a certain way to where I've been able to find and fulfill my purpose and continue doing so, right? Because I'm not, it's a continual journey. there's things that have happened throughout my career and throughout my life where there's been something that I've wanted, like more than anything, a particular assignment, moving to a different duty station, and everything's lined up and it's supposed to have happened, and for whatever reason it didn't, and it didn't make sense, and I'm mad, I'm pitching a temper tantrum, and I get, 4 or 5 years down the road, and I can look back and say, man, that would have been super detrimental to my career, and the place that I went instead, has opened up numerous doors for me and allowed me to get into different opportunities. It's if I wouldn't have gone into EOD, right, a job that I knew nothing about, kind of just fumbled my way into, I would have never met my wife, and nor had the kids or things like that. So the EOD career field has given me so many opportunities. The military in general gives you opportunities, but especially the EOD career field has given me so many amazing opportunities, given me family, given me friends, and it's really, now that I look back, I can kind of see how things have unfolded and been like, man, that's where I was supposed to go the whole time, and see how beautifully it's kind of worked out.
If you could be any hero on television, in the movies, in mythology, or any other book or tradition that you might think of, who would you be and why?
Oh my goodness. So I have to admit, so my wife is a huge movie and comic. I call her a big movie nerd, and I'm not. She gets mad at me because all of the movies that you're supposed to have seen, right? None of them. I was like, well, I've never seen that. Like, all the classics. So, if my son ever watches this and I don't say Batman, he'd probably kill me. But no, I don't know, that's a tough question. I don't know. That's a good one. I wasn't ready for that. I have to admit that, but man, that's a weird one. I'll tell you, I like helping people. And it's, but I get caught up in my own world a lot of times. And, if I'm to be truly honest, I get wrapped up in what I'm doing. I get wrapped up in the task, and sometimes I have to be smacked down and say, hey, pay attention to what's going on around you and go help this person. So whatever hero that I chose would need a lot of empathy and a lot of awareness of their surroundings, because that's the one area where I need work, is to kind of slow down sometimes and take a look around and help other people. So yeah, I guess Batman, he does seem pretty aware of his surroundings, and he tries to help people out.
That was a terrific answer. Cole, one of the things that was most striking about our pre-interview yesterday was your statement at the end of it, which is that you were not coming here to sell anything, to promote, or pitch anything. You were here to share your story, to share what you've learned.
Yeah.
Is there anything, as the hour closes, that you would like to share that you haven't already?
Yeah, just as kind of a summary, people are always in their unique situations, right? Be it with leadership, work, identity, purpose, religion, all of these things. I think when it comes to worldviews, right? The thing that I would just encourage people to do is, you would never go to Jiffy Lube for open heart surgery, right? You're going to go to the experts, and you wouldn't go to a heart surgeon to get your oil changed. So that's a lot of people in our culture I fear do that. So, when it comes to evaluating, religion, spirituality, purpose, identity, that's the thing that I've found most helpful is to try to tune out the static, right? There's people vying for your attention, for your emotions, for your bandwidth. Tune that out. Get with the experts in whatever area that you're trying to pursue and evaluate that part for yourself and go where the evidence leads you. And the identity piece is huge, like we talked about. It's people carry around so many labels, and some of them are very bad. And when people go through that process, like, don't sell yourself short, right? We do that a lot. We sell ourselves short. So those would be my parting words, and it's kind of what I've tried to do and what I hopefully pass on to other people.
Cole, it's been great taking a ride with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks,
and
Scott.
for everyone tuning in, if you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple or a comment on YouTube. We will see you next season for a whole new batch of terrific rides down the Purpose Highway. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Join our community today at purposehighway.com and subscribe to get notified when new episodes go live. Scott Mason, checking out.